Imagine a quiet kitchen in Charleston, South Carolina, where the air hums with the soft drone of an aging refrigerator, a sound that feels like an echo from livelier times. The faint scent of cinnamon lingers from yesterday's baking, warm and inviting, yet tonight it drifts just beyond my grasp, a ghost of comfort. A worn oak table sits before me, strewn with receipts, their edges curling like brittle autumn leaves, each one a silent testament to choices I've made. A single lamp glows softly, casting long shadows that stretch across the room, shrinking the space into something intimate yet achingly solitary. That's where I sat one chilly evening, my hands resting on the cool wood, staring at those papers as the question crept in: how does love, so full, so giving, sometimes leave you feeling like you're fading away? My name is Eleanor Harper, and at 76, I've spent most of my years believing I had life mapped out. I raised my daughter, Diane, in a little yellow house on Meeting Street, its sagging porch groaning under the weight of humid summer days and the chatter of kids skipping along the sidewalk. Charleston wrapped us in its arms, cobblestone streets winding past historic homes, the air thick with the sweet perfume of magnolias. I worked late shifts at the Charleston County Library, my hands perpetually dusted with the scent of aged paper, then came home to read Goodnight Moon by lamplight, Diane's small form curled beside me. Mornings were peanut butter sandwiches and hurried kisses before school, my evenings spent hunched over bills, the numbers blurring under that same dim bulb. 14 years ago, I laid my husband, George, to rest beneath a live oak, its branches heavy with Spanish moss that swayed like whispers in the low-country wind. His laughter once bounced off our walls, a deep, rolling sound that could lift even the weariest day. When he died, it was as if the house exhaled and never breathed again, leaving a stillness that settled into the cracks. I didn't search for anyone to replace him. George was my one great love, and some absences are too vast to fill. When Diane's divorce left her with 2 kids, Chloe and Ethan, and a house she couldn't afford, I didn't hesitate. Sunday mornings became shrimp and grits, the kitchen alive with the sputter of grease and the hum of cartoons drifting in from the next room. I was there for fevers and sleepless nights, pressing damp cloths to hot foreheads and murmuring lullabies until they drifted off. I slipped money into her account when the ends wouldn't meet, watching my own savings dwindle but convincing myself it was just for now. I never asked for gratitude. It's what family does, isn't it? Mothers, grandmothers, we give, quietly, always. Chloe, my eldest granddaughter, stole my heart the day she arrived. As a toddler, she'd clamber onto my lap, her sticky fingers tugging at my sleeves, demanding stories of princesses and pirates. She loved the tale of the mermaid who traded her voice for legs, though she'd scrunch her nose and ask why the mermaid didn't just stay underwater. She'd weave my gray hair into crooked braids, her giggles spilling out as she declared, "You're my queen, Grandma." On summer evenings, we'd sit on the porch swing, her head nestled against my shoulder, watching fireflies flicker in the twilight, the world hushed and perfect. So when Chloe, at 24, got engaged, her face alight with that reckless, beautiful joy, I wanted to give her something lasting. Weddings aren't cheap, and my pension barely stretches past the basics, but I offered to pay for the photo and video package, nearly $3,000, charged to a credit card that groaned under the weight. I pictured her years later, watching that footage with her own kids, smiling at the day I'd helped etch into memory. My hands shook as I signed the contract, but the thought steadied me. That night, I tucked the receipts away, hiding them like a confession. Diane didn't ask how I'd done it. Neither did Chloe. No one did. Maybe they thought grandmothers are bottomless wells of generosity, that love means never running dry. I'd thought so too, once. But as I sat there, the receipt staring up at me, a quiet question stirred: what about me? I pushed it aside, as I always had. Love, I'd been taught, is sacrifice, nothing less, nothing more. The Charleston night was alive with a restless hum, the kind that carries the promise of something grand just beyond reach. I stood on the edge of a renovated barn, its weathered beams draped in twinkling fairy lights that cast a golden haze over the rehearsal dinner. The air was thick with the smoky sweetness of pulled pork and the clink of mason jars filled with peach-infused cocktails. Laughter spilled from clusters of guests, young, polished, their faces glowing in the soft flicker of candles nestled in mason jars. My floral shawl slipped off one shoulder, the cool evening breeze brushing my skin like a whispered warning. I was 76, my gray hair pinned loosely, my heart full of quiet pride for my granddaughter Chloe, who was about to step into her new life. Chloe moved through the crowd like a melody, her white dress catching the light as she laughed with her fiancé, Ryan, his arms slung casually around her waist. She was 24, radiant, the kind of beauty that didn't need filters but got them anyway. I watched from the sidelines, my hands clasped, feeling like a guest in a world I'd helped build. The barn's rustic charm, raw wood, burlap runners, wildflowers stuffed into old bottles, was straight out of a Pinterest board, curated to perfection. I'd spent decades in Charleston, cataloging books under the library's humming fluorescence, but this was her stage, her story. I was content to watch, to be the quiet anchor in her orbit. Then she saw me. Her eyes caught mine across the room, and for a moment, I thought I saw warmth, the echo of the little girl who'd braided my hair and called me queen. She flashed a smile, quick, practiced, the kind you give before delivering bad news. She wove through the crowd, Ryan trailing her, her phone glowing in her hand like a talisman. "Grandma," she said, her voice soft as the rustle of marsh grass, "can we step over here for a minute?" I followed, my low heels clicking on the polished floor, to a corner where folding chairs were stacked like forgotten promises. The videographer, a young man with a man bun and a camera slung over his shoulder, was adjusting his tripod nearby, testing shots under the amber glow of Edison bulbs. The air smelled faintly of sawdust and lavender, a strange mix that clung to the back of my throat. Chloe stopped, turning to face me, her expression calm but distant, like she was reading from a script she'd rehearsed. "Look, I hope you understand," she began, her words measured. "The video's got this vibe, modern, clean, minimal. We're going for something really specific. I just think it'd be better if you're not in it much. Or, like, at all. It's not personal, Grandma. It's just the aesthetic." The word aesthetic landed like a stone dropped into still water, ripples spreading through my chest. I stood there, the barn's warmth fading, the laughter around us turning hollow. My eyes searched hers for a crack, guilt, hesitation, anything to soften the blow. But her face was smooth, her gaze already drifting back to the party, her fingers tightening around her phone. Ryan shifted beside her, offering a small nod, as if to say, "You get it, right?" I didn't get it. Not really. But I'd spent a lifetime smoothing edges, swallowing slights, so I forced a smile. The kind women my age perfect, the one that hides a breaking heart. "Of course, sweetheart," I said, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. "I understand." She gave me a quick hug, her perfume sharp and floral, then slipped back into the crowd, her laughter rising again, effortless. I stayed rooted, my fingers tracing the rough edge of a chair, the world blurring at the edges. The videographer's lens swept past me, capturing the scene, and I wondered if I'd ever been part of it at all. That moment was the first crack, not loud, not dramatic, but deep. It was the moment I realized love could be a one-way street, and I'd been walking it alone for longer than I cared to admit. The night after the rehearsal dinner, Charleston wrapped itself in a restless quiet, the kind that amplifies every creak and sigh of an old house. I sat at my kitchen table, the oak surface scarred from years of family dinners, now littered with receipts that glowed faintly under the dim light of a single lamp. The air carried a faint whiff of lemon polish, a remnant of my futile attempt to clean away the ache in my chest. Outside, palmetto trees swayed in the low-country breeze, their fronds whispering secrets I couldn't quite hear. At 76, I'd weathered losses, George's death, Diane's divorce, the slow drift of time, but nothing prepared me for the sting of Chloe's words, not in the video, the vibe. They looped in my mind, sharp as a splinter under skin. I spread the receipts before me like a fortune teller's cards, each one a marker of the $3,000 I'd charged to my creaky credit card for Chloe's wedding photos and video. My glasses slipped down my nose as I traced the fine print of the contract, my fingers trembling just enough to betray me. I'd spent decades in the Charleston County Library, cataloging books with a precision that bordered on sacred, and now I studied these papers with the same focus, as if they held the answer to why I felt so small. The house was still, save for the rhythmic tick of the mantel clock and the occasional groan of settling wood, sounds that felt like the heartbeat of a life I'd built brick by brick. Chloe's dismissal wasn't just a moment, it was a mirror, reflecting years of quiet sacrifices. I'd cooked shrimp and grits for Sunday brunches, the kitchen alive with laughter and the clatter of plates. I'd driven Ethan to soccer practice in the pouring rain, my old Buick's wipers slapping a steady rhythm. I'd paid Diane's overdue electric bill without a word, watching my savings shrink like a tide pulling back from the shore. All for love, I'd told myself. But love wasn't supposed to feel like erasure. I reached for the phone, my hand steadying as I dialed Nathan Brooks, the owner of the video company. His voice came through, gravelly but kind, like a neighbor you'd trust with your spare key. "Mrs. Harper, everything okay?" he asked. "I need to know about canceling," I said, my voice firmer than I expected. "The wedding package." He didn't hesitate, didn't pry. "You're within the window. We can refund most of it, say, 80%. Just send an email to confirm." "Business is business," I said, echoing a phrase George used to toss around when bills piled up. "Exactly," Nathan replied, a hint of warmth in his tone. "I'll wait for your email." I hung up, the silence rushing back like a wave. I looked around the living room, framed photos of Chloe's first recital, Ethan's gap-toothed grin, Diane's wedding day, books I'd read to them until my throat ached, the armchair where I'd rocked babies to sleep under a quilt George's mother made. It all felt like a stage set, props for a play where I'd been cast as the invisible backbone. The next morning, I brewed coffee, the rich aroma grounding me as I typed the email. "Please cancel the photo and video package for Chloe Bennett's wedding. Refund to my card. Thank you, Eleanor Harper." I hit send before doubt could creep in, the click of the keyboard echoing like a gavel. I didn't tell Diane, or Chloe, or even Patricia, my neighbor who dropped by with her Christmas cookie trays and small-town gossip. If my place in their story was to be unseen, I'd write myself out entirely. I sat back, the coffee cooling in my hands, and waited for the world to prove me wrong. I prayed Chloe would call, laugh it off, say she'd misspoken. That Diane would show up with her crooked smile, promising it was just a misunderstanding. But the phone stayed silent, and deep down, I knew, this was the truth I'd been too busy loving to see. The night of the rehearsal dinner clung to me like damp Charleston air, heavy with the scent of marsh grass and unspoken truths. I lay awake in my meeting street home, the ceiling a blank canvas where Chloe's words replayed in sharp focus, not in the video, the vibe. The house creaked under the weight of a restless low-country breeze, its groans blending with the distant hum of a neighbor's air conditioner. At 76, I'd learned to carry grief, George's passing, Diane's divorce, but this was different. It wasn't loss, it was dismissal, a quiet erasure that left my chest tight and my thoughts racing. Dawn crept through the lace curtains, painting the room in soft pinks and golds, but the light felt hollow, like a promise unkept. I wanted to believe it was a fluke, a moment of wedding stress amplified by Chloe's obsession with Instagram perfection. She was 24, caught in a world of filters and curated moments, wasn't she? Maybe she hadn't meant it. Maybe the fairy lights and mason jars had scrambled her senses. But the knot in my stomach told a different story, one I wasn't ready to read aloud. I needed grounding, a tether to pull me back, so I reached for the phone and dialed Diane, my daughter, now 52, whose voice had always been my anchor. "Hey, Mom," she answered on the third ring, her tone chipper but distracted, like she was half listening to a podcast. "Everything okay?" I hesitated, the words catching in my throat. Can we talk about last night? At the rehearsal. Chloe, she asked me to stay out of the wedding video. Said I'd ruin the vibe. A pause, long enough for the hum of the refrigerator to fill the silence. Then, a sigh. Oh, Mom, don't make this a thing. It's just her aesthetic. You know how kids are, everything's got to be perfect for the gram. She didn't mean it as an insult. Her words landed like a damp cloth, smothering the spark of hope I'd clung to. You didn't defend me, I said, my voice low, steady, but laced with a hurt I couldn't hide. You didn't say anything. Diane laughed, a light, dismissive sound that stung worse than silence. It's her wedding, Mom. Let's not turn it into your moment. I sat there, the phone pressed to my ear, the kitchen shrinking around me. The faded wallpaper, the chipped teapot on the counter, the photo of Chloe and Ethan pinned to the fridge, it all blurred into a single truth. I wasn't just invisible to Chloe. I was optional to them all, a prop to be tucked away when it didn't match the scene. I thanked Diane, my voice mechanical, and hung up before the tremor in my hands reached my words. The mirror above the sink caught my reflection, gray hair pulled into a loose bun, lines etched deep from years of giving. How had I become this? The woman who'd raised Diane alone, who'd balanced library shifts and school plays, who'd paid for braces and summer camps without a second thought. I'd carried them, all of them, through lean years and broken dreams, and now I was a footnote in their story, edited out for the sake of a vibe. The wedding day arrived, wrapped in Charleston's golden haze. I slipped into my pale blue dress, the one Chloe once said made me look classy, and fastened George's pearl earrings, their way to quiet comfort. At the venue, a sprawling garden framed by live oaks, I took my seat in the back row, the grass soft under my feet, the air alive with jasmine and anticipation. Chloe walked down the aisle, radiant, her smile a perfect curve. No cameras hummed, no lenses swept the crowd. I'd canceled the package, and no one seemed to notice, not yet. I watched, a silent ghost in their perfect frame, my heart heavy but resolute. This was my choice, my line in the sand, and for the first time, I felt the faint stirrings of something new, not anger, not grief, but the fragile outline of my own worth. The morning after Chloe's wedding, Charleston woke with a lazy yawn, sunlight filtering through the Spanish moss that draped the live oaks outside my meeting street home. I sat at my kitchen table, a chipped mug of coffee cooling in my hands, the air thick with the briny scent of the nearby Ashley River. At 76, I'd grown accustomed to quiet mornings, but this one felt different, sharp, electric, like the calm before a low-country storm. The wedding had unfolded in a blur of flower petals and applause, Chloe glowing under the garden's fairy lights, my pale blue dress a silent witness from the back row. No cameras had hummed, no lenses had captured the moment. I'd canceled the photo and video package, my $3,000 gesture undone with a single email, and the absence of that machinery felt like a secret I carried alone. The phone shattered the stillness, its ring slicing through the hum of the refrigerator. I knew it was Chloe before I answered, her name flashing on the screen like a warning. Grandma, she snapped, her voice at 24 years old cracking with a fury I hadn't heard before. What did you do? I set the mug down, my hand steady despite the storm in my chest. I canceled the contract, I said, my tone even, deliberate. I paid for it. It was my right. You what? Her voice broke, a mix of shock and venom. You ruined everything. The most important day of my life, and there's not a single professional photo. You told me I didn't belong in the video, I replied, each word measured, like stacking stones. You said I'd ruin the vibe. I made sure I didn't. You're so selfish, she hissed, the word cutting deeper than I'd expected. The line went dead, leaving a silence that roared louder than her anger. I stared at the phone, its screen fading to black, my reflection a faint ghost in the glass. Before I could catch my breath, it rang again, Diane this time, my daughter, now 52, her voice colder than a winter tide. "What the hell were you thinking, Mom?" "I was thinking I'm tired of being erased," I said, my voice low but firm, the weight of years spilling into the words. "I paid thousands to be part of her day, and she pushed me out." "You did this to punish her," Diane shot back, her tone sharp as oyster shells. "Admit it." "No," I said, a bitter laugh escaping. "I did it to respect her wishes. She didn't want me seen, so I made sure I wasn't." "You're unbelievable," she muttered. "After all we've done for you." That stopped me cold. "All you've done?" I said, my voice rising for the first time. "Diane, I've paid your rent more times than I can count. I watched your kids so you could work. I covered braces, soccer uniforms, plane tickets, and now this wedding package. Don't pretend you carried me, I carried all of you." The line went quiet, her breath a faint hiss. Then a click, and she was gone. By dusk, Chloe had blocked me on Instagram, her curated world sealed shut. Diane's text stopped. Ethan, 22, and Lily, 20, my other grandchildren, fell silent too, their usual Sunday replies replaced by a void. I was radioactive, a problem to be avoided, my name whispered in their group chats as the villain who'd stolen their perfect day. The silence should have crushed me, but it didn't. It was heavy, yes, like a quilt left out in the rain, but it also cleared the fog. For years, I'd been the scaffolding, steady, unseen, holding their lives together while mine frayed at the edges. I'd told myself it was love, but love doesn't demand you disappear. Sitting there, the coffee gone cold, I began to ask, what would life look like without them? Not out of anger, but clarity. For the first time, I saw the outline of a woman who deserved to exist, not just for them, but for herself. The Charleston sun rose slow and golden, painting the meeting street house in hues of honey and amber, but the warmth didn't quite reach me. At 76, I'd grown used to the quiet of early mornings, the way the world seemed to hold its breath before the day began. Yet this quiet was different, sharper, heavier, like the silence left after a storm has torn through and scattered everything familiar. The fallout from Chloe's wedding had settled like dust, no calls, no texts, no Sunday replies from Ethan or Lily. Chloe, now 24, had blocked me online, her curated world a fortress I could no longer enter. Diane, my daughter at 52, had gone cold, her last words, "You're punishing us," echoing in the stillness of my kitchen. I sat there, a mug of tea steaming in my hands, the faint scent of jasmine mingling with the briny tang of the Ashley River drifting through the open window. The receipts were gone, the $3,000 wedding package cancelled, but the weight of my choice lingered, both anchor and lifeline. I'd spent decades being the glue, patching Diane's rent gaps, funding Ethan's car insurance, slipping birthday cash to Lily. It was love, I'd told myself, the kind that doesn't ask for thanks. But love shouldn't feel like erasure, and I was done fading into their backdrop. I opened my banking app, the screen glowing under the morning light, and stared at the automatic transfers, $650 for Diane's rent, $85 for Chloe's phone bill, $200 for Ethan's insurance. My finger hovered, then pressed cancel, one by one, each click a small rebellion. Not punishment, but closure. I didn't send a text to explain. I didn't need to. The silence I'd once feared now felt like a canvas, blank and waiting. Diane noticed first. Her text came 3 days later, curt and cold. "Did you forget the rent this month?" I replied, "No." Her response was instant. "You're seriously doing this over a wedding?" I let it sit, unanswered. Another message followed. "You're punishing all of us for a stupid video." Still, I stayed quiet. They didn't see my pain, they saw defiance, a betrayal of the role I'd played for years. But I wasn't their scaffold anymore, and that truth shook their world more than I'd expected. A week later, Diane demanded a meeting at Mason's Diner, a weathered spot on King Street where the air smelled of bacon grease and strong coffee. I arrived early, as always, my hands smoothing the hem of my pale blue dress, George's pearl earrings a quiet comfort. Diane swept in 10 minutes late, sunglasses perched on her head, her face tight with exhaustion. She sat without a hello, her voice clipped. "So, this is it? The cold shoulder, cutting us off?" "I didn't cut anyone off," I said, meeting her gaze. "I stopped carrying everyone's weight." She huffed, crossing her arms. "This is ridiculous, Mom. All this because Chloe didn't want you in a video?" I leaned forward, my voice steady but heavy with years. "It's not about a video. It's about a lifetime of being a wallet, a babysitter, a backup plan. You didn't blink when she dismissed me, Diane. You let it happen." Her eyes flickered, a crack in her armor, but she pressed on. She was stressed. It was her day. "And I was invisible," I said, the words cutting through the diner's hum. "Again." She rolled her eyes, a gesture that broke something small inside me. "Maybe you need space," she said, her tone final. "Take some time until you're over this." I nodded, calm settling over me like a tide. "Thank you for saying that." I stood, pulled a 20 from my purse, and laid it on the table. "For your lunch," I said, then walked out, my step steady, the low-country air cool against my skin. I didn't look back. That night, I rummaged through a closet I hadn't touched in years, finding a wooden box tucked behind old quilts. Inside was George's gift, a painting set, brushes still wrapped, tubes of oil paint unopened. He'd bought it on a whim after I'd rambled about the smell of linseed oil, a dream I'd buried under family needs. I ran my fingers over the bristles, soft and new, and made a vow to unearth the parts of me I'd shelved for others. The next day, I signed up for a watercolor class at the library, led by Karen Mitchell, a bohemian artist with a laugh like wind chimes. I joined a book club too, diving into novels that stirred my soul. Slowly, I was painting a life that didn't depend on their approval, a life where I was enough. Charleston's autumn mornings carried a crispness that felt like a fresh page, the kind of air that smelled of salt and possibility. At 76, I'd found a rhythm in my Meeting Street home, tea steeped with jasmine, the soft scratch of a paintbrush on canvas, the distant chatter of gulls over the Ashley River. The fallout from Chloe's wedding, now months past, had left a quiet that wasn't empty but full, like a canvas waiting for color. My days were no longer tethered to Diane's rent or Ethan's insurance payments. They were mine, shaped by watercolor classes and book club debates over Jane Austen's wit. Yet the ache of my family's silence lingered, a bruise I pressed gently, testing its fade. One Saturday, after a painting session with Karen Mitchell, I stepped onto my porch, the boards creaking underfoot, and froze. Diane stood at the foot of the steps, hands shoved into the pockets of a faded denim jacket, her face drawn, shadows pooling under her eyes. At 52, she carried the weight of a life stretched thin, 3 kids, a second marriage, a pride that kept her from bending. We locked eyes, the morning light catching the gray streaks in her hair, and for a moment, neither of us moved, like actors unsure of their lines. "You're really doing this," she said, her voice soft, frayed at the edges. "Living without us." I set my mug on the railing, the ceramic warm against my palm. "I'm living for myself, Diane." I didn't know what that felt like until I stopped being everyone's anchor. She looked down, scuffing her sneaker against the sidewalk. "I didn't mean to hurt you, Mom. I thought I was helping Chloe, giving her the day she wanted." "You didn't hurt me," I said, stepping closer, the air sharp with the scent of damp leaves. "You showed me the truth." That was enough. Her eyes shimmered, a flicker of regret breaking through her guarded facade. "How do we fix this?" "Us?" "You don't," I said, my voice steady but not unkind. "You face it. You start with honesty, not for me, for yourself. I don't know if I can, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. I thought I was protecting them, Chloe, Ethan, Lily. But I pushed you away. I nodded, the weight of her words settling like silt after a tide. Maybe that's where you went wrong. Protecting doesn't mean choosing who gets to matter. She blinked, lips trembling, but there was no fight left in her. I'll try, she said, the words fragile but sincere. That's all you can do, I replied, stepping back, the space between us a quiet boundary I'd learned to guard. I turned and walked inside, the screen door sighing shut. Later that day, I drove to the Gibbies Museum, where my first gallery showing was unfolding in a sunlit community room. My paintings lined the walls, low-country marshes, a lone pier under a stormy sky, and the centerpiece, a ballroom, empty save for one illuminated chair, its solitude both haunting and defiant. Strangers milled about, their murmurs blending with the clink of wine glasses, but it was a child's voice that stopped me. Is that your chair? Sophie Turner, an 8-year-old with braids and curious eyes, stood before the ballroom piece, her parents hovering nearby. I knelt, warmth rising in my chest. It was, I said softly. But now I have a whole room. She grinned, like she understood, wide, unguarded, the kind that made you believe in new beginnings. I like it, she said. It's sad, but it's strong. I smiled, her words stitching something together inside me. Exactly. As the evening wound down, a woman approached, her eyes red-rimmed. That painting, she said, nodding at the ballroom, it's like being uninvited but still showing up. I know that feeling. So do I said, and we stood there, two strangers bound by a shared truth. Driving home, the city's lights blurred through my windshield, Charleston's charm wrapping me in its embrace. I didn't need Diane's apology or Chloe's forgiveness. I had my own reflection, in the canvas, in Sophie's grin, in the quiet mornings that no longer asked me to shrink. I was no longer the woman who faded for others. I was Eleanor Harper, and for the first time, that was enough.